Hello there, good evening. Lisbon has closed all of its funiculars following last night's crash, which killed 16 people and left more than 20 injured. Investigators have been sifting through the wreckage of the streetcar, trying to determine why the popular tourist attraction derailed. Portugal has observed a day of national mourning. The Mayor of Lisbon says the city needs answers. Well, the funicular are popular with tourists travelling to the city. There are 3 across the capital, with the railway system allowing people to travel up and down the city's steep slopes. Well, the crash happened on the Gloria line, which is the best known and most popular of the funiculars. Trams on the line depart every 12 minutes from both ends and can carry more than 40 people. It is a 3-minute trip which connects Lisbon's downtown Restauradores Square to the uphill Bairro Alto neighbourhood, famous for its vibrant nightlife. The crash took place at around 6 p.m. last night along the streetcar's steep 275-metre journey. Images of the crash site, which show near the bottom of the hill on a bend in the street. Our Europe correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, is in Lisbon, and a warning his report begins with images of the immediate aftermath of the crash.
Oh my God. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
This was filmed moments after the Gloria funicular crashed on Wednesday evening. Before the police and paramedics arrived, people nearby tried to pull passengers from the wreckage. One injured woman lies on the floor in obvious pain. There are bodies crushed under the carriage. A pushchair is pulled out.
We try to help those who are in the crash situation. So we saw there is nobody left, already dead there. Like
all dead?
Yeah, all are dead. Like 5, 6, 7 dead body, top each other, like the way it was happened yesterday. So people try to take some metal stuff from the the dead body. But still, they are already dead.
Today, the carriage was still lying on its side, where it slammed into a wall as it rounded a corner near the bottom of the hill, just off a major square in central Lisbon. Some of the metal rails had been torn off as the carriage fell out of control.
There was a horrendous crash, and my daughter in the next room had her windows open, and she heard screaming and came straight into us. We went downstairs, and a member of our tour party said, "Don't go outside, it's awful."
All day, emergency workers and investigation officials were inspecting the wreckage. No official cause of the crash has been announced, but there is speculation that either the brakes failed or cables snapped.
So this is the top of the hill, and the funicular carriage had only just left to make its way back down to the bottom when whatever happened sent it out of control, gathering speed as it went down the hill, round the corner, and it's there that it then crashed into the wall.
Passengers in the other carriage say that they suddenly dropped backwards shortly after it began to move up the hill.
We were about to go up, so we were like some meters up, and then we felt no brakes anymore, everything. We were going down with acceleration, and then it was very heavy, so it hit here in the bottom. The cable car was full with people in 2 sides and in the middle, so we hit each other. And we heard the other one coming up, rolling down. We heard it, that's falling. So we tried to rescue. My husband jumped from the window. I gave him my son because we were not aware about what's going on.
I only started to panic when I saw the other carriage coming down. If the other one crashed into us, we would all die. And I screamed, "We're all going to die here."
The first of the dead to be named was Andre Marquez, the brake operator on the funicular. Lisbon's 2 other funicular railways have been closed while the investigation is carried out. It has also been officially confirmed that foreign tourists were killed, although their nationalities haven't been revealed yet, as authorities work to contact their families first. The city is now observing 3 days of mourning.
Well, Alistair joins us live now from Lisbon, and an external investigation promised then, Alistair, with questions about its age, maintenance and the cable as potential contributors. What was clearly a really terrifying incident.
Yeah, and although it is something that tends to be used more by tourists than locals itself, partly because there's very long queues, it's going to be quite expensive, it is a tourist attraction essentially. You know, it is a major part of the culture of this city. It sits right in the centre of the city, and so of course everybody's speculating as to what might have happened. As I mentioned in my report there, the possibility that the brakes fell, possibilities that the cables snapped. Actually, when I was at the top of the hill behind me, a lady approached and said she was on it the other day and it was so heavy, so packed full of people, it couldn't quite reach the top, and her theory was that they were putting too many people on board. But you know, we don't know yet what the reason was for this crash. That is for the investigation to determine, and the sort of forensic work has been going on all day. We spent most of the day here, and actually at the moment it's probably the most activity we've seen all day. So I don't know what you can make out, but well, in the foreground you've got the one streetcar that was making its way up the hill as the other one was coming down, the crash was coming down. That's in a pretty good state, but people have been working sort of underneath it, and I think probably they're looking to try, and they've disconnected the cables from above it. I think they're looking to try and take that away. And then behind it, there's a heavy loader and a flatbed truck as well. So whether or not they're then also trying to take the wreckage away as well. But of course, you know, that will form part of this investigation. And clearly, I think from what we heard from the city's mayor and the Portuguese Prime Minister is that, you know, there is a desire to have those answers as soon as possible. And of course, we are still waiting on more details about the 16 people who lost their lives.
Alistair, bring us the latest there from Lisbon. Thank you. A titan of the fashion world, Giorgio Armani, has died at the age of 91. A name synonymous with Italian style, he dressed the rich and famous and became one of the best-known designers of the late 20th century. Tributes are pouring in, and a day of mourning has been declared in Italy's fashion capital, Milan. Sky's Rachel Venables has this report on the man known as King Giorgio, a mourning it does contain some flash photography.
I've done an haute couture collection, and naturally now it's all about carrying on and perfecting it.
The king of Italian fashion, who prioritised clean lines and simple elegance, Giorgio Armani has died at the age of 91.
He's been part of at least the fashion world for me, the length of my life. And he's just an icon.
I felt sad, and of course I admire him so much. Nothing like the tailoring of his clothes and all the things that he brought, all the passion he brought to the fashion industry. So it's a sad day for people that love fashion.
He leaves behind a brand worth billions, with the Armani Group saying in a statement, "With infinite sorrow, the Armani Group announces the passing of its creator, founder and tireless driving force, Giorgio Armani. Il Signor Armani," as he was always respectfully and admiringly called by employees and collaborators, passed away peacefully, surrounded by his loved ones. Born in the 1930s, he began by studying medicine before his military service, finally moving into fashion in the 1960s, when Armani worked as a window dresser for a department store in Milan, before setting up his own label with his partner Sergio Galliotti in 1975.
I mean, the man was an extraordinary marketeer. He started the business from his apartment in 1975. When he died, the company's worth revenues of 2.3 billion last year, and he was still the sole shareholder. So he had this exceptional control over his business that no other designer that I can think of in the modern age has or could even emulate.
He'd go on to dress A-listers, Hollywood and music stars like George Clooney, Cate Blanchett, Lady Gaga and Julia Roberts, who's paid tribute by calling him a true friend and legend. While Donatella Versace wrote, "The world has lost a giant today. He made history and will be remembered forever."
Armani might have been associated with high fashion, catwalks and red carpets, but the diversification of this brand over the years really helped it to stand out and succeed, with products from hotels to chocolates, perfume and homeware.
He was also a moderniser, banning the use of too thin models on his catwalks.
It just shows again sort of how visionary he was. He was always one step ahead of what others were doing in a business way. And he probably really understood his clientele. He knew they weren't all sort of rake thing models. A lot of his clientele were working women.
But he faced criticism too, making headlines in 2015 for comments about the dress of gay men. And in 2009, his company reached a financial settlement with Italian tax authorities regarding offshore subsidiaries, though no wrongdoing was admitted and no charges filed. Always passionate about the details, Armani was working right up until his death, planning an event to mark 50 years of his iconic brand. A funeral chamber will be set up in Milan this weekend before a private funeral for friends and loved ones. Rachel Venables, Sky News in central London.
Well, let's bring in now Susie Menkes, who is the former fashion editor at the International Herald Tribune and the former editor of International Vogue. Very good evening to you. So what a titan, the man who tore up tailoring, literally ripping structure out of men's jackets. How would you sum up his contribution to the world of fashion?
Well, here is a fashion designer who made clothes that people not only wanted to wear, but had joy in wearing. And you know, that's not something that you see so often. And his success lasted on that for so many months, weeks, years. And it was because he understood, particularly women perhaps, although he started very much with men's clothes.
He was utterly devoted to his craft. He said, didn't he, that his greatest weakness was that he was so hands-on, working, as we heard there, right to his final days. Is that the impression you got of his devotion and his love of his job when, on the occasions when you met him?
He absolutely loved his work and was fascinated and wanted to do it. And sometimes he was a bit angry with it, which is something that we all understand. But the main thing he did was change people's lives. And you can't complain about that. The idea that he made men particularly comfortable in what they wore, not just that it looked good, but it felt good. And I think women would say the same thing, including the women who wore the grand dresses to the events that not for ordinary people, but he made them especially so that they were comfortable. And for that, he will always be loved and thanked.
And what was so extraordinary, apart from the impact of the clothes themselves over, literally 50 years, as we heard, was that how he turned this into a multi-billion euro business. Not just the clothes, the makeup, the jewellery, homeware, hotels even. How did that come about?
He was trained to understand money and was not somebody which we see too often in the fashion world who has great ideas but hasn't a clue how to put them together. He was much more strong on that and had a real vision of how he wanted to develop and did one by one. I always remember when he started doing the menswear, and it had never really been it was simple that he should do that. And then you went on to women's wear and haute couture in women's wear, and that was really quite something. So unexpected and so successful. And right to the end, I saw him and he'd talk about it, and he was still totally involved in everything that he did.
Well, let's talk about the love affair with Hollywood. Mutually, everyone says, seems to have started with American gigolo Richard Gere in 1980, head to toe in Armani outfits. But how important was that as a showcase for the brand? Because I think he did more than 200 films, didn't he, in the end?
Important. It was the absolute life story of him at that point. It's not so easy to get your way into the what the designers want to wear, or what the designers want other people to wear is often very difficult. But somehow there was a meeting between the spirits of the designer and the people who wore his clothes. They felt at one together, and that was really the secret of his success.
Well, Susie, I'm wearing an Armani jacket tonight. It's Collezione, so I think that's the cheap end, the bit that he did not design. Nonetheless, it's probably more than 20 years old. So was that part of it, do you think, this idea that made in Italy, which is partly him, was quality and structure? How much of all of that was Armani?
I wouldn't be so sure that he didn't have anything to do with it. I have seen him myself personally on various occasions go and talk, all in Italian, but I could still understand what he was saying. That's not quite right. Make that longer, make that shorter. He was totally involved in what he did. And I think that's the secret, that a designer who really thinks about the person he is dressing or the clothes he's making, even if they're going to a much younger generation, that is somebody who understands and works towards the future.
And what a legacy he has left as well. Susie Menkes, a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Vladimir Putin has this week enjoyed a show of strength, welcomed in China as a guest of honour to stand shoulder to shoulder with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un for a huge military parade in Beijing. Today, Ukraine had its own moment of unity as members of the so-called coalition of the willing gathered in Paris to discuss ending the war. Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron says Ukraine's allies stand ready to offer security guarantees when the fighting ends.
En effet, nous avons aujourd'hui 26 pays qui formellement...
Today, we have 26 countries that have formally committed themselves. Several others are still clarifying their position, but 26 countries have committed to deploying troops as a reassurance force in Ukraine or to being present on the ground, at sea or in the air to provide this reassurance to Ukrainian territory and to Ukraine the day after the ceasefire or peace. This force does not have the will or the objective of waging some war against Russia, but it is a force that must guarantee peace and provide very clear strategic signalling.
Well, as the group met in Paris this morning, emergency services in Odessa fought fires in the aftermath of an overnight drone attack. Russia has continued to bombard Ukraine since the coalition began meeting in March. It launched the largest aerial attack of the war in July, hitting Ukraine with more than 700 drones. And just last week, 23 people were killed in a Russian attack of almost 600 drones and more than 30 ballistic and cruise missiles. And while negotiations for a peace agreement stall, Russia has continued to make advances on the battlefield. Well, I'm joined now by Pekka Haavisto, the former Finnish Foreign Affairs Minister. Welcome to you. Ukraine must become a steel porcupine, indigestible for present and future aggressors. So said the EU's Ursula von der Leyen after this meeting. Do you genuinely believe that that is possible, an impregnable Ukraine?
Well, the situation looks very difficult at the moment. Of course, it's good that the coalition of the willing has its meeting and so forth, but what is still lacking is the ceasefire or final peace agreement. And while Russia is continuing the attacks against Ukraine, of course, we don't see at the moment any light in the end of the tunnel. It looks like what was promised by President Putin in Alaska to President Trump has not been really realized, trilateral meeting or bilateral meeting, so that Russia and Ukraine, together with the US, could advance the peace at the moment.
Well, indeed, Putin seems to have drawn strength from that trip to China. Once again, the Foreign Ministry outlining their red lines today. President Zelensky giving an interview to French media, suggesting he can't, in all good conscience, ask the Ukrainian people to give up territory because it would embolden Russia. It feels like we're back at square one.
Yes, of course, when we speak about the security guarantees, which are now discussed or were discussed in Paris, of course, Ukraine has also said that even more important than the territorial questions are the guarantees that Russia will not re-attack the country. And that is what is now under construction in this coalition of the willing, somehow trying to increase the threshold or make a higher threshold for any attacks from the Russian side. And that's, of course, promising that 26 countries are on board. What is also remarkable, of course, is the strength of the Ukrainian army, and that's, of course, the backbone of any defense in the future as well. Ukraine has been developing its military, and of course, part of that coalition that are now formed countries are promising more aid, also material aid, military aid to Ukraine.
Well, indeed, Zelensky talked about weapons manufacture across Europe not at its full potential, also suggesting that they had more potential in their own production of weaponry, but they've run out of money. You know, is that a solution, do you think, to strengthen Ukraine's defence industry?
Well, that's, of course, one of the key issues. I think what Europe or Coalition of the Willing can provide is some additional security to Ukraine, but the key is, of course, Ukrainian own military and own army and military production and so forth. And this is certainly something where European countries, European Union, NATO countries can help Ukraine. But if we think the whole security arrangements. Of course, the backbone of that also is the US commitment to Ukrainian security, and that's why there was today also a call from Paris to President Trump to Washington and trying to assure him that Europe is doing her part when US is also doing her part.
Yes, and sanctions back amidst that conversation should Russia not be willing to act. But also, President Trump saying to Europe, stop buying Russian oil. Will that happen?
Well, that's a good question, because we are speaking mainly about the two countries, Slovakia and Hungary, which are somehow continuing the business with Russia, business as usual. And of course, this is something where we as Europeans should get involved and trying to influence Hungary and Slovakia. But also President Trump can have a certain influence. These are countries that listen carefully what the US is saying, and probably US can also a little bit add the pressure. And of course, now what happened with new tariffs regarding India and so forth, of course, the key issue is trying to stop the war economy of Russia and pushing also Russia towards peace talks through these economic means.
So 26 countries, it was lauded today, have declared readiness to get directly involved, land, sea and air. Realistically, though, how many would put boots on the ground in Ukraine? You know, the UK, France, is it time we got the detail of the commitment that we're being asked for, do you think? Or are we looking at a never-ending war with that massive line of contact? You know, Finland talks about its huge, long border with Russia, but, you know, Ukraine has the same.
Yes, it has the same, and I think realistically we can think that those countries that are bordering Russia probably will not send boots on the ground, because these countries have to take care of their own security lines and borders and so forth. But I think there are many tasks in the coalition of the willing, not only to send boots on the ground, but also send material aid, training and helping developing Ukrainian military and economic part of the thing and so forth. And it's promising that we have such a big group of countries, because we can then divide the tasks and there can be division of the duties between these countries.
Pekka Haavisto, former Finnish foreign minister, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, you're watching The World. Still to come, as an Israeli minister calls for majority annexation of the West Bank, we hear from residents who say they've been harassed by settlers.
gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly weighing up plans to annex the occupied West Bank. The territory has been at the heart of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians for decades. Well, the United Nations considers the West Bank to be occupied land, with the Israeli military regulating movement in and out. Israeli settlements have been expanding across the territory, and some ministers now say they intend to impose what they call Israeli sovereignty over 82% of the land. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons travelled to Mechaya to meet the people who say they feel under permanent attack.
Along this remote mountain track is a key to understanding the anger gradually ripping apart the occupied West Bank. And the key are these people, Fatima and her mother-in-law Fada.
Hello. Hello.
They live a remote farming life in this makeshift camp, but they are watched and visited every day by Israeli settlers intent on taking this land. It has boiled over many times. Tense confrontations, intimidation, anger. We're blurring the faces of the juvenile settlers, but the menace is clear.
The situation has become extremely difficult, not just for us, but across the whole West Bank. Settlers do whatever they want under the protection of the military. And when the soldiers come, it's just to protect the settlers. It's really bad. At night, we don't sleep. We stay awake waiting for the settlers. 4 or 5 of them come in their cars each night, sometimes on motorcycles, right up to our doorsteps to terrify the children. We sit through the night, afraid they'll set fire to our homes and belongings, trying to force us to flee with our kids.
Every day the settlers come down here from the ridge just up there, sometimes as often as 4 times a day, and they sit on that shelf just above a cave, singing songs, chanting abuse. They're trying to intimidate the family here to leave this land so that the settlers can take it for themselves. And they're acting with impunity. The police won't stop them. And now, at least one senior government minister is backing them, saying that Israel should seize all this land, in fact, more than 80% of the whole West Bank, and annex it for Israel. This is Israel's far-right finance minister proposing what he calls sovereignty to stop terror, but which many would describe as repressive annexation.
Behind our biblical, historical and moral right to the entire land of Israel, the political and security role of our sovereignty is to ensure that a Palestinian Arab terrorist state is never established in our land.
But fear and mistrust is endemic. A few days ago, a settler was attacked near these olive groves. The Israeli military responded by ripping up thousands of beloved olive trees. Marzouk's great-great-grandfather planted them. Marzouk claims he's a victim of state-sponsored intimidation, but says he feels powerless to resist.
It's only going to get harder. The government is made up of settlers, and they answer to no one, not even the army. When you go to the soldiers who join them, the settlers say, I'm the judiciary, the police and the army. If you have a problem, go complain to the UN.
While the world watches war in Gaza, the West Bank has been a stage for pain, conflict, fury and misery. And the signs are that it might be about to get even worse. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Al-Mukhayir.
Well, this is the world. Next up, what's it like reporting on a historic summit inside China? Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith gives us a behind-the-scenes look.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Well, this week we reported on the historic Chinese summit where Xi Jinping welcomed Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un and a host of other world leaders for days of events culminating in a huge military parade. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith delivered blow-by-blow reporting of the biggest moments, rushing across the country to capture them as they happened, while sometimes brushing up against restrictions imposed by the Chinese state. Here she gives us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like reporting on an event of this scale from inside China.
It has been a truly momentous week in China. One of power, politics, and paranoia too.
Barriers up everywhere, police.
From a summit that brought together some of the world's key disruptors to a parade laden with warning and shows of allegiance designed to make a statement. A display, no doubt, directed at America. But covering these events in a place like China comes with additional challenges.
Hello. I need to remind you that this is very dangerous.
In a place where people are not able to speak freely. But at a moment where global norms feel in flux, come with us to explore how China is capitalising and how it is projecting its power.
It's about 7 p.m. on Saturday here in China. I'm at Beijing South train station. I'm about to catch a train to the neighbouring city of Tianjin. We're at the start of a really big, really significant week for China. It's going to be hosting a couple of major events with a raft of major world leaders from some of the most important, some would say some of the most disruptive countries around the world. So big questions about what they might achieve, any deals, any pacts. But I think beyond those practical, immediate things, there's questions about China's role, how it's going to position itself. Could it be a global leader? Could it rewrite the global order at a time where it feels Donald Trump has been ripping it up?
While we were packing our bags and getting on our way, the first of the world leaders touched down in China. Narendra Modi of India, Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. There were others, of course. 26 countries will be here in total. Not all had the cameras, but all had matching welcome parties. Carefully choreographed diplomacy. Sunday morning, and there's a clear sense in Tianjin that it's playing host to something major. The only way from our hotel to the summit venue is by shuttle bus. Huge swathes of surrounding roads completely closed. And this is the key reason we and the world leaders are here. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, a meeting to discuss security and development issues. The guest list has had some observers dub it part of an axis of upheaval.
This is where we're going to be based for the next few days. Often when you cover summits in China, it can be a little bit frustrating. They often keep the media in big conference rooms like this, crucially far away from the action itself. It's also quite difficult to get even scheduling information from the Chinese authorities with this sort of summit. They are really, really protective of the information. We find out a lot of what we need from some of the visiting delegations, the Russians or the Indians and so forth. But what they lack in information, they have made up for with high-tech show. This robot apparently will help us out wherever we need.
As we were getting settled in, all eyes were on one key arrival, the Russian President Vladimir Putin. What he does and says in the coming days will be keenly watched. President Xi had one-on-one meetings with a lot of leaders today, but one was truly noteworthy, with India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Two nations with a history of bitter conflict and rivalry, but a souring of relations with Trump, 50% tariffs on Indian goods, has paved the way for Modi to be here.
So we've just had the readouts from the meeting between Xi and Modi, and the warmth of the language, given the scale of the historic animosity between the two countries, is really quite remarkable. Remember, it's only 5 years ago that violence literally broke out between them on their shared border. But in a way, the success of this meeting is testament to what Xi Jinping is trying to achieve more broadly, but particularly at this summit, an alternative and open arms to those who feel pushed away by Donald Trump.
Time for Alive to take stock.
And it is really telling that at that moment he has chosen to come to China.
Evening brought the welcome banquet. At a fractious time for the world, this was quite the statement. And no questions about who was the guest of honour here. For Putin, a lingering conversation, right-hand position for the pictures. It felt a bit like the others were simply trailing along as they headed on in to have dinner. Their evening rounded off with a cultural show. Our evening rounded off with the final edits to our piece. Monday morning, and it's back on the bus, back to the media centre. Cameraman Lex headed off to film some of the more striking security measures as we got settled in. But for all the careful staging, these were the images of the morning and the ones most likely to stick. China, India and Russia, holding hands, sharing jokes, a show of how well things are going. Time now for the leaders' meeting and speeches. I got plugged in to listen, but remarkably, the organisers cut the audio for all the visiting heads of state. Such is the paranoia here about anything they haven't pre-vetted. But all eyes were on Vladimir Putin, because for him, this is the backdrop, his war in Ukraine. Barely 2 weeks ago, he was in Alaska with a different president.
Thank you very much, Vladimir.
His war rages on, and he is looking to shore up support. We have now had confirmation of what Vladimir Putin said in that speech. The really interesting bit was that he said he will be discussing in one-to-one meetings with leaders here exactly what was said and discussed in that Alaska summit with Donald Trump. So any hope that America and others might have harboured that China wouldn't be given the opportunity to weigh in, absolutely put to bed. There's much that divides those who sat at this table. What they share is distrust of America. Overt criticism kept subtle. But no prizes for guessing who he was talking about. The afternoon rounded off with a press conference with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and then a late dash to the train station to get back to Beijing. And as we were on the move, so was someone else, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, Beijing bound on his highly armoured slow train. So much diplomacy and symbolism still to come. Time to take stock. If politics is at least in part about optics, it's hard to say that this summit hasn't been successful. There was a whole range of images that will make for really uncomfortable viewing back in the US. And while what's happened in the last few days doesn't necessarily mean that Trump's plan for peace in Ukraine is dead, it does make his influence feel at least a little bit more flimsy. And from China's perspective, that at least is a win.
It's Tuesday morning. I'm on my way to work. And I just want to show you the extra security in this. This is our office compound. We just happen to be one row back from where the big, massive military parade is going to be tomorrow. But look, barriers up everywhere, police. Unbelievably, there's a whole extra security scanner that I've got to go through. And people live here, and so people have to go through this just to get into their homes.
We're back on base, and so is President Xi. And in a more relaxed setting, he got down to the details with Putin. Meetings marked for the excessively warm words. Conversations continued over a slow stroll, and there was no doubt over the messaging. China is keeping Russia's war machine afloat, and this is the relationship that matters. Time to film some analysis to chew it all over.
It comes at a time where Donald Trump has been reaching out to Vladimir Putin, where Donald Trump has been trying to build those bridges.
But just a short while later, the police paid us a visit.
Hello.
Someone had captured me on a long lens filming on the balcony.
We need to remind you that this is very dangerous because you're sitting on the edge of the balcony.
We film there all the time, but these days are not normal in Beijing. The next morning for us starts at an ungodly hour. The first stop, a temporary media centre to collect our accreditation. An enormous military parade in Beijing means enormously high security, complete with no fewer than 3 thorough scans and facial recognition. And then a bus through the eerily deserted streets of Beijing. And as the sun rose over Tiananmen Square, the anticipation was palpable. So we're part of this big flood of people who are going in to get security checked. Media, of course, but also selected spectators too. And this is normally a really busy road, just running straight up the side of Tiananmen Square. Finally, it was time to take our positions. It began with a deep hush across this historic square. A sense cannon fire was calling this country to attention. Nothing short of utter perfection would have been acceptable here. Every flex, every gesture, even their height exactly matched. Tens of thousands marched to remember a world war where this country suffered so much. But under the eye of China's leading regime, looking back is clearly not the key point. From our vantage point, it was quite the show. But these are the images most likely to make history, not just what's on show, but who came to see it. Vladimir Putin to his right, Kim Jong-un to his left, a clear signal of a trio in sync. And it did not go unnoticed by the one man they probably hoped would be watching. Mid-morning, a post from President Trump. "Please give my warmest regards to Putin and Kim," he said, "as you conspire against the United States of America." For us, a rare opportunity to film a piece to camera in Tiananmen Square, where it is normally forbidden.
While a lot of it is directed at the domestic Chinese audience, a homage to China's rise and the vision of President Xi, be in no doubt there is a clear message for the world too, and it is a message about Chinese power.
On our way out, we tried to talk to spectators. But sometimes in China, you sort of know people have been pre-warned not to speak. It was a while before we made it back out and back to base. In the afternoon, cameraman Lex and I filed our final reports, how to sum up such a momentous week. Whichever way you cut this, it really has been an enormous week for both China and Xi Jinping. Day after day of these images of him commanding the agenda, presiding over these big events and, frankly, being pandered to by other countries who need him. And look, we shouldn't overstate this. There are still lots of differences and divisions between China and the nations who have been visiting this week. And the US, despite all of Donald Trump's turmoil, still absolutely holds this huge power to convene and to influence. But nevertheless, I've reported from China for nearly 3 years now, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a period with such levels of confidence and swagger. It really does feel like something might have shifted. China has made efforts over many years to persuade the world that the centre of global power does not necessarily have to be in the West. Perhaps it is now making inroads.
Helen Ann Smith there. Well, this is The World. Next up, China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin are overheard discussing the possibility of people living forever. Taking a look at that after this.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor. I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, it was a moment that could easily have been missed, but once spotted is surely one of the most eye-raising images of the China summit. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin overheard speaking about people living to 150 or even achieving immortality.
In the past, it used to be rare for someone to be older than 70. And these days, they say that at 70, one's still a child.
With the development of biotechnology, human organs can be continuously transplanted, and people can live younger and younger, and even achieve immortality.
Predictions are, this century, there's a chance of also living to 150 years old.
Well, let's talk more. I'm joined by Shipad Choljapaka, Professor of Population Studies at Stanford University. Hello to you. So, two issues here. First of all, how scary is it that autocrats want to live forever? And secondly, how do we all live together? What are the prospects?
Well, it is scary to think about autocrats living forever. But I don't think it's going to happen. Prospects for most of us, if we think about the last century, we doubled lifespans from about 40 to maybe 80. So, and things have slowed down some because the causes of death are more complex. But I would guess we could easily expand from 80 to, 120 or so. See no particular evidence that we cannot do that. As far as what was being said by these world leaders, I don't think continuous organ transplants are quite there yet. We've transplanted organs that are grown in pigs, for example, but we still have a lot of issues in terms of the acceptance of the organs. And you can't really get organs in large quantity from people because, somebody has to usually die or something like that to give you an organ, especially a critical one.
Yes, and to be fair, there are accusations of organ transplanting, aren't there, across parts of the world. So is it simply a question of taking those things that currently kill us, too much salt, sugar, being overweight, being stressed, and eradicating them, or is it about gene therapies, gene editing, the extra things we can do?
It's a bit of both. I think we can do a lot in terms of, just these behavioral things that you were talking about, diet, exercise, what have you. And we've learned a lot about those, and we keep doing that all the time. We can get the benefits of these things even as we get older. In terms of gene therapies, they show a lot of promise. The trouble with most gene therapies is, from a population point of view, that you have to do something that is good for billions, and most gene therapies are good for tens of thousands. because they're fairly specific, and so there's hope that if we do little bits, it'll all add up to something positive in the end.
So you don't think we'll find one pill, for example, just briefly, that cures our, how our mitochondria age, that something will be, a critical change that will increase our life expectancy?
I don't think so. There's been a lot of talk about this, and people have looked for a silver bullet for decades, but nobody's been successful at it. And I don't think there is one. You just have to look at what people die of, and we've got to fix what ails you, essentially. And diet and things like that, kind of stuff you were talking about.
Pad, apologies for stepping in. We've run out of time. I could do half an hour with you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. News at 10 is next.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.